what does it look like to go do it for those people, benefit those people in the ways that are most compelling, the most excellent for their lives. We keep prioritizing the experiences that get us addicted to devices, that drive the most revenue. But on the flip side of it, those were not the things that actually tested best in terms of making people's lives better.
Tom Chi is a technologist, innovator, investor, author and advisor and inventor and founding partner of @One Ventures.
How can we bring this to create these next 10 years in a way that you don't lose the track of this technology that we invented, geopolitics, all the areas of environment?
We back innovative new ideas and deep tech that brings in radically better unit economics paired with radically better environmental economics altogether. And we have over 50 companies that we build on that. It's probably maybe another 5 more years before things get into the zone where it's like both the performance and comfort and all sort of thing kind of catches up.
Hello everyone. My team and I have been crafting content and stories that inform, inspire, empower, and bring real value to you. If you haven't already, please take a moment to check that you're subscribed. It's the easiest way to support our work and stay updated with every new release. Join us on this journey of learning and discovery. Hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for our latest drops.
Hello and welcome to the Dinis Guarda YouTube podcast show. Once again, profiling the great leaders of our time and the people shifting our society and civilization with a betterment and trying to bring as well the innovation and the conversion between society and business and technology. In this series that we've been profiling personalities from all areas of industry, politics, academia, and technology, we've been always thriving to bring personalities that actually can bring, I would say, inspiration for this world that is quite complex. And I love history, so history tell us a lot of different things, but we keep repeating a lot of things, but at the same time, a lot of different areas. We are in a time of change and in a time that brings a lot of different opportunities, but a lot of challenges. Today, I'm quite excited to bring to our series someone that I would say it converges in all the areas that I just mentioned. So from a technologist, innovator, investor, author, an advisor, and inventor. And so I welcome Tom Chi. Tom Chi is a fantastic personality that has a work that spans science, product development, entrepreneurship, and climate-focused investment. His career has been marked by a consistent focus on understanding complex systems and turning ideas into practical tools that can operate at global scale. His professional journey is started quite early at an unusual age of 15, where he worked as an astrophysical researcher at the Harvard Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics, where he studied active galactic nuclei. And this exposed him to scientific research that shaped a lot of his analytical thinking and interest in large systems, data, and long-term outcomes. Over the period of his career, he's been, of course, created one of a fantastic profile that comprehends work with Fortune 500 companies, where he gained experience in the organizations, strategies, system analysis, and large-scale business operations. Tom Chi later transitioned into corporate technology roles, where he focused on building and scaling digital products used by millions of people. Some of them include the Microsoft Outlook, where he contributed to tools that became part of the daily communications for millions of individuals and organizations worldwide. He also worked on the Yahoo search, which was probably the first mainstream search worldwide. And among a lot of the acumen's and different achievements, we have as well, for instance, Yahoo Answers, where he actually has contributed as well to the product. And I would like to highlight for some of the things that for people probably a bit older, as well, his work in Google X, now X, Google Advanced Technology Lab, and at Google X, Tom Chi served as head of product experience. And in this role, he worked on early stage technology that aimed to solve large global problems. I want to highlight as well his work as a prolific inventor. Over the course of his career, he has been granted around 75 patents across hardware, software, mechanical systems, and design. And of course, much more here, but I would like to highlight the work as an author and as a researcher, where he has multiple books. And we're going to be talking about his last book, where he's been actually highlighting a lot of different research. We're going to be talking about the book Climate Capital, Investing in the Tools for a Regenerative Future. And he also co-authored books such as Our Prosperous Planet, with illustrations and ideas for planetary healing, and Genius Ideas for Planetary Healing. And he has other articles and videos which we're going to put in the description around these interviews. Tom, it's an honor to have you here.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the conversation.
So Tom, I want to start by, someone that started at 15, of course, as a researcher, in a scientific, one of the most important research centers of cosmic. I would like to go to this age and probably even early. As a person that you are today, what would be the first thing that inspired you to be what you are, and some of the mentors or people that marked your journey?
Yeah, so as mentioned, my first job was as an astrophysical researcher. I studied active galactic nuclei and star-forming regions in the infrared between 1 and 10 micron, built a bunch of instruments, put some of my instruments in space, did ground observations, contributed to papers, did all that kind of stuff starting at age 15. And I think the kind of reference to earlier in my life, there was actually a very important moment earlier in my life because I was born in Taiwan and came to the US. And when I came to the US, I didn't have any, English language skills. So I did pretty poorly in school for a couple years because like half of the subjects are about, reading, writing, things where language is pretty central. But I worked extremely hard and I eventually got to the best report card I'd ever gotten, which was all A's and one B. And my mom, I was excited to go show it to my mom. But my mom, instead of kind of being excited that, hey, this is the best you've ever done so far, she was like, what's going on with this B? She was like very disappointed still. And instead of having the normal kind of thing, which is like, oh gosh, I got to work harder, impress my mom more, I actually had the exact opposite reaction because I was like, I've been working so hard. Like I literally have not even taken a day off in the summer because I'm trying to catch up and I'm trying to learn a language I don't have any background in a short amount of time. And up to this point, that was like most of my conscious life, right? So like my entire conscious life has gone into getting to this report card and you're unsatisfied with it. And it actually led to this really important realization back when I was 9 or 10, which is I don't want to work for other people's approval anymore, right? It's just not worth it. There's no guarantees. Like the thing that I actually want to do is if there's subjects that I'm passionate about, let me just learn as much as I can. Like who cares whether, the course is supposed to cover the first 10 chapters and you're supposed to do the next 10 chapters in the next semester. I'm gonna do the whole textbook in the first week, right? Because I'm actually passionate about the subject. And for all the other subjects that I'm not passionate about, I'm going to do the minimum amount to get an acceptable grade. And that reprioritization of my time completely changed my life because I like very quickly advanced through like college level mathematics and college level physics because those were things that I was intrinsically excited about. And if you start at age 10, you're doing linear algebra at age 11, you're doing vector calculus at age 12 or 13. You're getting a lot of the critical skills that you need to be able to be an astrophysicist. So by the time I became 15, yes, I just actually did have the skills to, at least do the entry level astrophysical, research work.
Well, that's very impressive. So your mother reverse engineer your way of looking at the world and push you to.
Oh, she wasn't doing that on purpose. It was definitely I think she was more disappointed in my attitude after that, but I was insanely energized by my attitude after that because just the shackles of needing to go follow the curriculum were gone. And I would go to the library and get advanced physics books. I would go to the library, get advanced mathematics books. I would just work on it because I loved it. And that's honestly a better look, if you can connect with something like that, that's a better way to do your education. If you can't, then sure, follow along and you'll pick up something instead of nothing. But if you do find some passionate threads where you know that the skill that you're learning might be useful for other things as opposed to, just some hobby, then yeah, just go as far and fast as you can. Don't wait for anybody.
No, that's fantastic. And your trajectory has been quite stellar in a lot of ways because you you went to, of course, first of all, fantastic education, and you end up actually going and working in some of the biggest companies in the world. And at the same time, always with a very strong focus on multiple areas, so science, nature, and as well human psychology and economics. So uh, a bit of your career, I touched some of them in the intro, and of course, I think I will pick like a very small fraction, but some of the highlights that you want to touch, because of course you work in some of the biggest companies in the world, and now of course you're leading an investment fund, an investment venture. So a bit of that background until now.
Sure. I mean, people typically want to hear about the biggest things. So the biggest things are I worked on Microsoft Office, which changed the way that everybody kind of does work at work, though I will say in some ways worse, but in many ways better. I worked on, web search, at Yahoo search, though a lot of those people got sucked into Google search once Yahoo basically decided to exit the business. So in a way, a bunch of the work that I did is basically affected both. I was in there at the early days of social media, so you'll see my name on some patents having to do with tagging. So like that, things like the hashtag, all sort of thing, though I'm not happy at all with how that one went. And I also was, had a product experience at Google X. So I worked on things like the self-driving car, Google Glass, all that sort of thing. So in my estimation, I've worked on, two, three things that have already changed the entire world. Though ultimately, I would improve a lot about how social media went, and I'm hoping that as the self-driving cars kind of spread, that they really see through the positive potential that the team had intended for it. But yeah, I think those are kind of the ones that people are most likely to have interacted with in kind of their day-to-day lives. But in terms of, the types of projects I'm intrinsically excited about, I've also was the person, an inventor who was the first to build a robot that helps to replant coral reefs and seagrasses, so to restore underwater ecosystems. I did a lot of advanced research, including stuff where it just like is incredibly technically exciting. Even though like Google Glass was not that successful for Google, we did invent a lot of the stuff that is in the space now. So when I saw the Apple Vision Pro, like 30-second commercial, I was like, oh, that violated like 5 of my patents in 30 seconds. Fantastic. And actually, I do mean that, when I say fantastic, I really mean that because I want those inventions to get out in the world. So if Google is not aggressively commercializing it, then let's get it out there. I'm excited for it. Though I will also toss out there that we made a device that only weighed 37 grams, right? Like everybody else's device is like a taco truck on your face. And I'm just going to tell you, like the effort it takes to get something to be 37 grams, like that's lighter than some phone cases, right? Phones are like 170 grams, that sort of thing. They're massively heavier. We made something that's like whisper light, incredibly difficult to pull off, especially more than 10 years ago.
Yeah, I want to touch that. So because exactly what you said. So Google Glasses in particular, and you were the main development. You shift the technology industry approach to prototyping and highlighted the critical social challenge as well for wearable technology. And for instance, I just received actually some some kind of AI glasses, like they call it now. And it's interesting.
Yeah.
I was comparing what you did. Is that first of all, it doesn't work still, and it's very heavy to have it in your eyes. And so compared to what you did, it was still super cutting edge, and we have to see that this was a long time. So and of course, this pioneer wearable AR shift to enterprise blueprint for successors and foundational UI UX. So I would like to touch, because this is part of what you said as an inventor, as someone that shifts a lot of different things. So if you could highlight this work with Google Glass, because we are getting that direction, and ultimately it's just a question of time until these glasses, or at least some kind of visual, because so far I think the Google Glass is still the most innovative, like you just said, but in a lot of ways it's kind of mind-blowing, the possibilities.
Yeah, look, I mean, actually, at CES, there were a couple that were announced that I was pretty excited about. I think the main thing that was kind of holding Glass back in the day is that there's these patents on this holographic transmissive technology that basically allows you to put the thing in plane in terms of inside of a flat lens. And we couldn't have access to it. The inventor wanted to charge us insane amounts of money, like way more than Google was willing to spend on it at the time. But actually now that technology appears to be more broadly available to the world. And to me, that was like the last bit, right? If we could actually just make the thing flat enough to fit into regular glasses, as opposed to we basically had a prism block in the front, and that prism block basically way heavier, way bulkier than it needed to be. That said, a bunch of the other folks should learn from the rest of our patents in terms of how to make the thing comfortable, light, all that sort of thing. We did a lot on that front. And again, I'm not here to be like some corporate troll. Like I want great technology to be out in the world. I think like we took a really compelling swing back then and really discovered a lot of amazing stuff that I'm excited for the world to discover in the coming years. And it's probably maybe another 5 more years before things get into the zone where it's like both the performance and comfort and all sort of thing kind of catches up. But we were a little too ahead of the curve, which is something that happens in my career for sure. But I don't mind it. Like as an inventor, you want to be sometimes out there even before the commercial potential is ready.
So I want to touch this because you were in the inception of search with Yahoo Search, then inception of Google Glasses, which is still ahead of the curve even now, because to be honest, no one actually still managed to put it mainstream. So from a technologist, and of course, one of your super skills, among others, is your capacity of prototyping and looking at product. I'm a product geek myself, and one of the things I've been learning is the details, and as well, for instance, in my case, of course, in a small scale in startups, what I've been finding is sometimes when you build a product like this, there's a huge amount of work that you can do. And it implies, of course, all the areas around prototyping, around the UI UX, around the even usability. And of course, like you said, in the case of Google Glasses, it's still right now cutting edge, let's be honest. But in the case of Yahoo Search, changed the entire search, because from Yahoo Search, we went to Google Search. And now we have ChatGPT. In the end of the day, is like a natural progression of partly what you start with Yahoo Search. I would like to touch how we see, first of all, product and the UI UX, especially in the last 20 years. There was so much change since you started on these areas.
Yeah, my career tends to be at the intersection of relatively difficult to make tech and then making that tech, usable, available to the world. Because behind the scenes on search, it's incredibly deep tech, right? You got your qual, index, rank. Every one of those things has got a lot of sophistication to it. And as different things, become possible on the back end, you figure out ways to make them available and visible on the front end. So Yahoo Search was actually the first to fully ship like auto suggestions. So as you type, you can see different search suggestions. And that was a decent, piece of backend engineering work to be able to go have something that could, respond with that low latency, but to be, live updated based on how the query composition is changing day to day. And we can get into the mix on all those sorts of things, but like as a product geek, I think you will go appreciate that, kind of need all the elements to work together, right? It's not enough just to have amazing tech if people can't figure out how to use it, can't make sense of it, all that sort of thing. And a lot of times, both skills don't exist in the same person, right? The person that might be your designer might have gone to art school, and the person that is your backend engineering, went to a technical university, and they don't necessarily speak that language, each other's language that well. So I think I had a really important role because I was a person that had done both in my career, and I could speak both those languages quite well. And I think relative to being a successful inventor, that is actually a relatively straightforward approach to being a successful inventor. Be there at the intersections, be a good translator of things at the intersection. And I think beyond just being a translator, in which case you might still have incredible value, but you wouldn't necessarily be inventing anything, then when you are at those intersections, ask yourself, well, who are we doing this for? And what does it look like to go, do it for that audience, for those people, benefit those people in the ways that are most compelling, the most excellent for for their lives. And I think that's that kind of combination of being that translator, but actually being very fast at prototyping toward the things that actually made sense in people's lives. That is the stuff that allowed me to invent so much. Um, Look, it oftentimes takes you down pathways where the world doesn't end up following, but like some of my favorite prototypes in Google Glass actually were things that never shipped widely because there was so much force behind, hey, let's just get all the normal mobile software onto a heads-up display, right? Let's go get your social media feed, let's get, Twitter notifications. And honestly, that stuff like makes the experience terrible actually because you're living your regular day and then basically these things are jumping in your eye and like kind of like pulling your focus off to something that has nothing to do with what's in front of you. And the stuff that I actually liked most about glass prototypes that I built was basically reinforcing the awareness of the space that you're actually in. And that could happen through recognizing things inside of the scene. We did a thing that if you were reading a newspaper or magazine article, you could look at any part of it and we could go grab the digital link for you because basically even one sentence is already disambiguating enough for you to identify the specific article it came from. So we could actually have this running log of all the links to all the things that you had physically read in the world. That was amazing. Another thing that was really amazing, though it sounds like really, basic, is that we had things that really just connected you better in the world. So for example, when I was an astrophysicist, I would work there in the summer, but I was in a basement the whole time, freezing cold basement. And given that, I would just completely lose track of time. But like when I was prototyping Google Glass, of course, I'd still work in a lot of lab settings and people often are coding in cube farms, all that sort of setting. Then you feel disconnected from the outdoors. We made a really simple prototype that when you look above the horizon, that you can basically see exactly where the sun is in the sky and what the temperature and the weather is outside. Now, it sounds real simple. I mean, you just are looking at the weather like a weather app. But when you can actually see where the actual sun is, and you can see what the actual conditions are above you just by looking up, it just feels so natural. It feels like this is what technology was supposed to be. It wasn't supposed to be us looking in this little box. If you want to know the weather, look up. And it doesn't matter if you're in some cold basement with no windows, like you can look up. And I felt like almost like I had a breath of the outdoors for like a couple seconds. And that sort of thing, like we're not translating that sort of experience consistently well into our devices. I think we keep prioritizing the experiences that get us addicted to devices that drive the most revenue and for very natural reasons, right? But on the flip side of it, those were not the things that actually, from my perspective, actually tested best in terms of making people's lives better.
I completely subscribe, and as well, you are a legend on that part of creating products. And as well, I think I want to highlight a question that I have here. So you kind of coined the term and took it mainstream of rapid prototyping. So for young people listening to us, and this was part of your experience lead at Google X, that you use low-cost materials like clay, coat hangers, and chopsticks to build functional prototypes in under 1 hour.
Yes.
And as well, one of your mantras is doing is the best kind of thinking. This becomes actually part of the industry philosophy for minimizing time to learning. So could you highlight this? Because I think this is a big challenge building products. I have that with my teams and I've been having a lot of interviews and now we take this.
Yeah, I think the main issue is that when people want to be innovative, they think that being innovative is about having the best ideas. And I'm going to tell you that no matter how skillful you are at shipping product or how smart you think you are, then the difference between a really experienced person that shipped a bunch of products and a person that's totally amateur and is starting to ship products for the first time in their career is that the person that is totally amateur is wrong 96% of the time. And the person who's like shipped a ton of product is wrong 92% of the time, which is we're still wrong most of the time. I think the main difference is that by the time you become a person that has shipped a dozen products that is used by hundreds of millions of people, even billions of people, then you actually just understand that you're wrong. right? If you know that you're wrong from the beginning, you don't take your initial guesses that seriously. If you think that you're going to charge into a thing and be this great inventor because you have the best ideas in the world, then all your ideas are going to last all the way through the iteration process and be loved by the customers. You're in for a terrible surprise. Now, that said, the difference between 96 and 92 is important, right? Like it means that you're right 8% of the time and a newbie might be right 4% of the time. But really, on the flip side of it, we're all still mostly wrong. It's just that like the people that have shipped a lot of things know that, hey, since I'm going to be mostly wrong, it is about the pace of learning. The faster I can learn, the faster I'm going to succeed at innovating. The fact that my first 3 versions, 5 versions, 11 versions weren't going to be the thing, that's actually totally fine. Just can we get through those first 11 versions in 2 weeks as opposed to getting over them in 2 years or 20 years? So I have a bunch of lectures online if people want to just see the practical practice. But yeah, I have a TED Talk and a bunch of other things where I talk about how we built 150 hardware prototypes of Google Glass within the first 10 weeks with just 3 people, right? That's faster than most people can. The reason that I use things like, paper, wire, clay, all that sort of thing, is that there are materials, and this is if you're trying to build something physical. Honestly, I I actually had been practicing that before I got to Google X, but a lot of it had been more in the software space as opposed to the physical space. And the reason that I gave my talks about the physical space is, for most people in the tech world, building hardware is much harder than writing some software. Especially nowadays, you can go ask Claude or Cursor or whatever to go write a thing for you and then edit it 5% at the end, if you want. Then yeah, hardware is harder than software. So I just really wanted to show people that you could even take the hardest thing you could imagine and build it in less than an hour. The reason for materials like wire and clay, coat hangers, all that sort of thing, is that there's a type of material that moves at the speed of thought, right? So if I want a piece of wire to be in the shape of a square, by the time I'm done having the thought, I'm mostly done making it into a square. Like there might be like a 3-second lag between me having the thought and the thing actually taking the form. If I'm trying to take a piece of clay and I want it to be flat as opposed to in a ball, yeah, within 3-5 seconds, I can make it into that shape. And basically, physical things that express at the speed of thought make for the best prototyping materials because it basically allows your thoughts to become physical things in the shortest amount of time. And because you can make that in the shortest amount of time, you can test it in an incredibly short amount of time. And the testing drives that high rate of learning. So at the end of the day, the core KPI for the whole thing is the rate of learning. And the rate of learning, we would define it in our team as key learnings. And the key learnings were basically based on a thing you actually built and tried. What are some of the things that you learned from it? It wasn't like, oh, I looked up a white paper and in the white paper, so-and-so refers to so-and-so, or they speculate about that. That's not learning at all, right? Or even if it was like a case study of a thing that actually happened, I guess you're learning about what they did, but you're not learning that much about whether it's going to work for you yet. So like, I don't consider that learning yet. That's like a doorway to a potential experiment, but not learning yet. Because you might say like, oh, I like how they did it there. I wonder if it would work for us. And then you might line up an experiment that you then execute the next day that says like, oh yeah, in our setting, then our customers don't like it because, they prefer something like this, or they were confused by so-and-so step. So there is no real learning until you actually try the thing. This is why, like making building is the best type of thinking. Like thinking is a terrible way to think, right? You build the thing because you actually just want to see how it affects human behavior when you put it out there. And you want to see that, it affects it in a understandable, positive, and useful way for folks. And if it does those sorts of things, then great. That is actually your learning. Now, the way that I would run the team is I would measure the team's progress by how many key learnings we were making per week, which intrinsically meant we were building at least that many things per week. And then I would also manage things based on rate-based goals. So the reason that I know that we did 150 prototypes in 10 weeks is that I tracked it. Like we were supposed to hit 15 per week, and we did that for 10 weeks. And some weeks we did 16, and some weeks we did 14 or 13, but we averaged out to 15 over those 10 weeks. That's why I know exactly the number. Now, the reason that to go manage toward that number is you typically can't manage innovation toward a specific outcome because innovation has, historically has been difficult because it both has time uncertainty and it has outcome uncertainty. You don't know which thing is actually going to work. You don't know how much time it's going to take for you to iterate to get to the thing that works. That's why everybody is like, oh, innovation's so hard. But I think the main breakthrough that we made, through the work, in my career was basically that an approach to innovation where you could get time certainty, and even just getting one of those certainties together out of the two, like makes innovation dramatically easier. So there is basically this idea of what I call a prototype number, and it basically is a speculated number on how many prototypes you would need to do to have near perfect understanding of a particular, thing. And a relatively simple thing, like let's say you wanted to go draft an email to an important investor and you wanted to get some feedback on it before you sent it out, then sure, you might grab some other investors of the same stripe. And I think if you showed them the email you're going to send, you got some feedback, you edited it, showed a different version, got some feedback. You did that 3 or 4 times, you probably got all the stuff that you need. If you did that 100 times, there's a point where it's just not useful anymore, right? So there's a point of diminishing returns where 100 prototypes of that type is actually not useful because you're at the flat part of the asymptote in terms of learning. But up through the first couple of pieces, then you're actually getting really valuable, feedback. So for an experiment like that, or like a work stream like that, then the total prototype number might be like 5 or 6. If I've gotten feedback from investors of a similar stripe before I go send this email to a really important investor, and I've done that 5 or 6 times, you probably learned almost everything that you could possibly learn about that one, right? And because there's a prototype number that when you get to that number, you'll have near perfect understanding of the situation, then this is how you create time certainty. Because you might say to yourself, I'm going to do 1 experiment per day, each day for the next 5 days. That means in a week, I'm going to be able to send a really impactful letter to this investor, full stop. So given that you basically created time certainty, even though you don't know exactly what the contents of the letter are going to be after those 5 iterations. So when I say we did exactly 150 prototypes within 10 weeks, that's because I set a rate goal that basically created time certainty that we would have learned most of the stuff that we needed to learn. And that was on 3 different tracks. It was basically on the interactability, the human comfort aspect of it, and a bunch of the vision and display aspects of it. So we basically had 3 major categories that we were experimenting into, did a lot of work in all of those categories, and learned a huge amount in the first 150. And similarly, something like Project Loon, we did 100 prototypes in 4 months. Like this is the basic construction of how innovation was time boxed here. We had a prototype number that we would aim to hit. We would aim to hit it in a specific amount of time. That would define a rate for how quickly you need to make the prototypes. And then rapid prototyping is the skill by which you actually succeed in making those prototypes in a very short amount of time.
That's very impressive. And one of the things I want to touch is because the work that you did on that had an effect in a lot of different layers. Like you said, for instance, when a technology fails, it might not fail or parts of it fail, but the others become very successful. Of course, Yahoo search changed completely, mostly all the search as we have it today. And Google Glass has multiple parts of this prototyping and multiple layers that we can still look today. So one of the questions I'm particularly interested in is, for instance, and that's 2 layers because you are a scientist, a technologist, an investor, and a thought leader, which is 4 areas that touch together, and that's very important for me personally, and I love to discuss this. So you're, for instance, picking the Google Glass, because I want to use that as a context between the impact that the Google Glass had in terms of technology and product, and then the impact in social media, and of course in surveillance and all of the things that right now we see as the biggest challenge. And then at the same time, it still had a lot of impact in business, especially on the business side, the B2B, because a lot of the Google Glass actually were very successful in terms of used for a kind of warehouses and a lot of industrial places. And as well, a lot of the features that were pioneered and popularized through Google Glass were actually brought to most of the smartphones technology that we use now. So for instance, like voice assistants, displays, contextual notifications, that actually was all created by you guys. So I want to touch this. So how you see this part? So you touch about the prototype. How do you see the prototype from the product final used by the users and the implications? Because in the end of the day, you disrupt multiple industries that are still going, because from the time until now, and now is like the time that probably will go mainstream, but it's still not mainstream. But as well, there's a lot of things that the Google Glass got, and of course the scaring about the privacy, that mostly then it happened with Facebook and Meta and all the different things. I want to see how you see that both as an inventor, technologist, and as a thought leader, because I know that you have strong views around these things.
Yeah, people like there was like a mini backlash where people were like, didn't you guys think about the privacy concerns of like having like a thing that you could wear that people could record things through? And it's like, yeah, absolutely. We were testing it within the first 2 weeks. For example, like we found out that if you have a red recording light, it actually gives you a completely different social response than if you have a blue recording light. A red recording light is basically universal language for your being recorded, and there are people that were more likely to be like, "Oh, hey, what's going on?" The actual split on what's going on, there were some people that were like, "Hey, I don't like that," and there are other people that are like, "Hey, am I on TV? Am I on like a YouTube thing?" And they're basically hamming it up for the camera, basically. So yeah, we knew that within the first 2 weeks. We knew that if you made it a blue recording light, then it's actually less likely to kind of trigger either of those responses, but that actually raises an interesting thought. Like, do you want to make it like more private to you, to the world around you that you're doing recording versus not? And I think that is already an interesting product decision. But the whole point is that we were testing that stuff from the beginning. Now, when it actually came to the point where we needed to launch, then that's where the interesting kind of like split happened, in that we had done, as you just mentioned, a lot of tests with very task focused users. So for example, if you're an anesthesiologist or a surgeon or whatever, and you're working on a patient, then one of the ways that anesthesiologists most often make mistakes is they're trying to go and apply the anesthetic at the injection site, like monitor the patient. So they want to be looking at the patient, but they're also wanting to know the vitals of the patient. And that tends to be on machines that are either on the side or behind them. So this means they need to keep looking away from the patient in order to go look at the output of the machines. When we could actually just put those same numbers in their eye while they were looking at the patient, errors went down, confidence went up, just all the stuff that you want happened. And what we basically, had by the time that we were about to announce the thing into the world was a bunch of use cases like that, where when you're focused in on a well-known task, then having the right digital information to provide context to the task that you are specifically on just makes you better, reduces the error rate, improves the confidence, reduces the time, to be able to go do the task well, that sort of thing. So, but these were mostly business to business use cases, right? These were mostly enterprise use cases where there was some important task to go do for a professional. That said, Google is a consumer company. So there was a lot of push to say like, well, can we get all the consumer use cases working? And on that front, we didn't actually have as much in terms of what was exciting yet. The thing that we had that was kind of closest to most exciting was kind of like a GoPro that you could wear like glasses, as opposed to strapping to a helmet or strapping to your bike or whatever, which is why when Google Glass was first announced to the world, then there was like a bunch of footage of people like parachuting onto Moscone Center and like doing like extreme like bike tricks and all that sort of thing while wearing the thing. And that's great. I mean, there were actually some great experiments that we did on embodied empathy, that if you're able to literally see through somebody's eyes, it actually does affect you emotionally, where you go on something of a similar emotional journey to them when you can literally see through their eyes. And I think that honestly has a lot of really useful things for psychology, for like, for negotiating and like creating a peace process. I do think that there's a lot of things that were very ripe for further experimentation, where we just kind of touched that there might be something there, and then we didn't go that much further with it. Because at the end of the day, Google is a consumer company. They want to do B2C things, and they want to do B2C things to, hundreds of millions to billions of people. And because of it, there was kind of a desire to like, even though this might be great at the enterprise use cases, even though this might be great for embodied empathy, which might be useful for therapy or negotiation or that sort of thing, just like closing a divide amongst people that can't understand each other well, then those weren't the areas that we doubled down on to do more on. The things that we kind of released to the world were the things that were most B2C. And I think at the time they were more middle of the road. They weren't the best use cases that we had. I think maybe the most fun thing that we had in there was being able to capture, what is now called live photos on Apple, but we basically, we had a whole thing where when you captured a photo, we'd capture a little bit of video around it. And you could relive these moments through your eyes really quickly as you were going through your photo stream. But that was kind of the best stuff we had in terms of the actual consumer use case at the time. And I think we pushed it out there because Google is more of a consumer company. And I don't think that we really led with our strongest, foot forward there. But it also probably did make sense in terms of we weren't about to become an enterprise only company. It wasn't like we were going to only make a bunch of hardware for enterprise, and we're just outside of the Google ethos.
It's very special, and I love the way you put it in all the layers that it touch. So, one of the things that happened, and I think going through your trajectory and all the different things you did is from deep tech, you became increasingly, and right now you went into climate, and you brought a lot of your innovation capacities to shift from focus from consumer electronics to global challenges. And you founded as well One Ventures, where you use your prototyping and product experience to invest in deep tech companies aimed at environmental restoration and climate destabilization. So can you highlight, first of all, what is One Ventures and your work on this right now, focus and all the different areas that you're touching?
Yeah, the name is At One Ventures because it's about being at one with ourselves, nature, and the universe. And the purpose of the firm is to help humanity be a net positive to nature. And the way that we do that is we stack rank the industries that are currently doing the most damage to nature across four different, categories: air, water, soil, biodiversity, with the idea that if we're able to go address the industries that are most damaging there, then we can really massively reduce the negative footprint that humanity is currently having on nature. And what's great about the stack ranks is when you actually get into these stack ranks, it is kind of a classic Pareto distribution where the top 2 to 5 industries already is like 85, 90% of the damage, right? So like you actually don't end up needing to solve thousands of problems to get rid of most of the problem. You actually only need to solve in 30 different industries. What we do in those industries is we use innovation very purposefully, in that we back, innovative new ideas that and deep tech that brings in radically better unit economics paired with radically better environmental economics altogether. Because what that allows is when all three of those are together, when you succeed economically, you are also succeeding ecologically, right? Like they are not at odds with each other. And we have found over 50 companies that meet the bill on that. And we are, we've raised 2 funds. We're in the process of raising the third. First fund is actually, I probably can't say a bunch of things about things. It's performing awesomely. I can't tell you, for SEC reasons, the exact amount and everything, but yeah, you can look into it. Everything's going great. This is a better way to go approach investing in this type of space because we don't need to like wait for regulation to force people to do a thing. We don't need to wait for consumer behavior to change and like prefer a greener thing, right? Like industry already finds virtue in better unit economics without you needing to say anything else. But in this case, we basically have paired the desire for better unit economics, we have like inexorably paired it with the ecological benefit as well. So in the process of them achieving better unit economics, they're basically cleaning up their business, but without them, having to do it through like the stick. They're basically like a carrot where they are improving their margins, improving their throughput, and in the process cleaning up, the industrial operations that are currently the industries that are doing the most damage to nature.
So just before, I have a lot of questions when we go into your book, but before that, so coming to the work you're doing at One Ventures, so one of the things I love is that you have focus on air, water, soil, and biodiversity. Can you just highlight some of the fantastic things that you mentioned, some products that you can share? Because I think right now we are in a, especially with all the the geopoliticals and all of the things happening, there's a lot of concerns in terms of how you see climate, how you see even sustainability, which is something very dear to me, but it's how you sell it and how you, even the narrative around that. And I think your case study is fantastic because you are actually picking it, like you said, for solving real problems, but as well with very specific investment benchmarks.
I mean, if people want the full download, they can go to the website and there's the full portfolio. If you want a more concentrated one, but that still covers like 10, 12 companies, then I just got a TED Talk out there where I go into a number of them in some detail. But for the purpose of this interview, I just give you a canonical example or so. So in terms of water pollution, there's 4 industries that are more than 90, that just their contribution is more than 90% of water pollution by volume on planet Earth. Agriculture is the biggest by a lot. That's like 78% of it. But then after that, you get textiles, paper and pulp, oil and gas. And within textiles, one of the major sources of industrial water pollution is textile dyeing. So, to give you a very specific example, we backed a company that has invented a new type of textile dyeing machine that instead of having huge vats of saturated dye, that once you're done dyeing everything, you just pour the excess into the river. It works a lot more like an inkjet printer where it has the very least amount of liquid possible to get the dye into the fabric. And because of it, we don't work with a lot of water in the first place, so the possibility of having wastewater is way less. And the tiny amount of water that we use to get the fabric dyed, then right after it kind of gets into the fabric, it's very lightly damp. It's not even wet, like you wouldn't touch it and say my hand is wet. It's like very lightly damp where you can say like, oh yeah. And right after it does that, it goes over an infrared dryer where the tiny bit of water that we did use becomes water vapor, right? So it doesn't become pollution inside of rivers and streams. Now, in terms of the cost structure, the big source of the cost structure in textile dyeing is the energy used to heat those super saturated, vats of dye. And we actually get rid of all of that energy too. So we are actually able to run our system at 2.5 to 3x lower OpEx. This is not even close, right? And if you're able to get that kind of cost savings on your OpEx, then you're just going to win that type of business in the long run. Like other people that have 3 times your operating cost are not going to be able to go compete. But on the flip side, we've made the textile dyeing environment way more humane as well, because those, if you go to these plants where they're doing textile dyeing, it's not uncommon for it to be 45, 50 Celsius inside of the facility, because there's just so many, like vats of hot water with super saturated dye inside of them. And in our setting, you can just normal conditions like in an office building, you can basically have that level of comfort and have, 1/3 the OpEx, 1/2 the OpEx compared to current. So that's an example of one. Like I'll give you another one, like air conditioning and refrigeration. There's 4 major greenhouse gases: carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, fluorinated gases. Fluorinated gases are officially the smallest on a GWP of 100, but they have a very long lifetime in the atmosphere. Some fluorinated gases have a 50,000-year half-life, a 10,000-year half-life in the atmosphere. So in the longer span of things, fluorinated gases will actually be quite important contribution to the warming of the planet. But in terms of that Pareto distribution, just air conditioning and refrigeration is more than 85% of all fluorinated gas emissions just come from that, right? So if you can just solve it for air conditioning and refrigeration, then you have gotten rid of most of the fluorinated gas problem. And one of our companies, Gradient, has been able to work on this for air conditioning. And they've been able to go replace the refrigerant that basically is the source of these fluorinated gas emissions with one that generates no fluorinated gas emissions and has about 6,000 times less greenhouse gas warming potential for any emissions that it does have. And given that, then it's like, well, I mean, yeah, we're basically got rid of the greenhouse gas impact of the air conditioning industry if that ends up being a core technology that is used widely. Also, from the operating side, the energy efficiency of the thing makes it, 40 to 50% cheaper to run.
That is very impressive. And of course, we'll put the links to the website at onventures.com and the portfolio, which has really very impressive companies. So I want to go right now to your book. So, the last book, and of course, you've been writing and doing a lot of thought leadership, like you mentioned, there's TED Talks, there's a lot of work. So Climate Capital, it was released by Wiley, and it was actually, it's going to be released because it's in February 2026. So we are in a pre-launch, let's put it that way.
Just a couple weeks. Yeah.
Yes. So I want to touch because the book is Climate Capital, and it touches about investing in the tools for a regenerative future. And
Yes.
I think more than me speaking, how do you see this? Because at the moment we have a very kind of crazy geopolitical fragmented way of looking at this, but I think everyone that has a bit of wisdom understands that there's no way we can live without sustainability. But I would like to see how you see these things, and that's just picking some quotes that I have at least from the preview. Framework to design a real, sustainable, and non-harmful approach to our global economy. And seeing economics for a design discipline is truly. So I want to touch this in your own words.
Oh, yeah, I can speak to that one really quickly because I do think that's a very important message to get out there. We basically allowed economists to pretend like economics is a science. In fact, a lot of them refer to their work as the dismal science. But the thing about science is repeatable in a way that economic policy does not seem to be repeatable. And what economics appears to be, for somebody like me that has done both science and engineering and design, is of those disciplines, it is closest to a design discipline. Because, in a design discipline, there's like 100 ways to design a refrigerator. Actually, a bunch of them would be fine. Some of these are retro styled, some of them have a special kimchi part because kimchi needs very special, temperature and humidity handling. Great, 100 ways to make a design a refrigerator. And depending on your audience, it works better or worse for those audiences. If you're not a person that eats kimchi, why do you need 10% of the refrigerator go hold kimchi? That doesn't make any sense, right? So the reason that I think that economics is more of a design discipline is if you look around the world, actually all these national economies are designed a little bit differently. And all these national economies are designed a little bit differently. And because they're designed a little bit differently, they have different outcomes in terms of how well they get to wealth distribution, how well they encourage new entrepreneurship and job growth, how well they, kind of meet, the goals of the country in terms of growing GDP, being internationally competitive in markets, all this sort of thing, right? And given that, and look, there's also some economic designs that probably are going to work great in this country and won't work, great in another country. So again, like the kimchi shelf inside of a refrigerator, it feels like a design discipline. Now, when we think that something is a science and not a design discipline, we're going to treat it in the wrong way. And there's actually a worse version of this, which I think is actually the dominant position, which is economics as a religion. And specifically people believing in the invisible hand of the free market as if it's like some sort of God force. It is not, right? That to me is basically you abdicating your responsibility as a designer to do a good design on the thing. Because when you believe the invisible hand's going to do no wrong, it means that when an economy hurts a big chunk of people, then you're like, what can you do, man? It's the invisible hand. It's God's will, if you will. I'm like, that's the wrong frame 100%. The science frame, at least you're trying to do systematic study, even though it's not the right, it's a category error, the thing that you're pointing at. But design discipline, that is the right way to go think about economics. And then you get interested in how did people design their economies differently around the world? Which aspects of this seem to be relevant to the people that we're trying to design our national economy for? And given that, how do we mix and match and try these different design ideas in order to go figure out the ones that are going to get to the greatest, fit across the design constraints, the goals that we're trying to hit? That would be the rational way to approach economics. Instead, we hire these economic priests where it's like, oh, this guy's from the Chicago school, this guy's from the so-and-so school. And, because of it, they need to believe in these equations. And we've seen that these people can't make a stable economy for more than 8 years. That's a very poor performing product, right? Imagine you bought a refrigerator and it copped out after 7, 8 years. You'd be like, these designers suck, right? But yeah, our economists as designers suck because they don't realize they're doing a design discipline. They just want to have their name next to an equation, and because of it, they pretend like it's a science, and they just do kind of a crap job of it. I know that's very harsh to an entire discipline, but I bet there are a lot of economists that do understand that they are in a design discipline and they're doing their best to pull in the best policies from places where it's working. But the book more broadly, yeah, actually try to take on all three challenges. So in part one, I lay out that there's three big challenges in the 21st century. One of them is the future of the economy, and we're going to have to redesign it just given the way that robotics and automation and AI are going to displace an interesting number of jobs. I worked on the self-driving car. Like 3% of jobs in the US are truck driving jobs. Like if we increase the unemployment rate in the US from 5% to 8% just that 3% lost their jobs, that would already require like some real deep economic work, right? So like and that's not counting anything to do with AI or anything else yet. I'm just talking about things that I like directly worked on and know have the potential to automate out some physical jobs. Like my thesis advisor launched Kiva Systems. So like code that like me and my colleagues worked on also is the stuff that's powering Amazon Robotics. So like the parts of the factory where all these robots are kind of moving these pallets around, then yeah, that's code that I worked on in grad school, or some of it. But long story short, we're like, the downstream descendants of code that I worked on then, but no big deal. But like, given that has given me like a really front row seat to, yeah, no, we are probably going to displace on the order, I would estimate like 20 to 30% of jobs. Now, if it happens over 50 years, it'll be very gradual. If it happens over 10 years, it'll be very disruptive. I think there is a potential that happens over 10 years, and given that, then I want to speak to that. But long story short, the three big challenges, which I lay out in part one, are climate destabilization, because a lot of our natural systems are breaking down or getting into weird states that are going to be very disruptive to human life and health, and of course, ecosystem life and health. Second big challenge is the redesign of the economy, which we already talked about. Third big challenge is geopolitical stability, which you mentioned earlier. So that's part one. In part two, I introduce 4 skills that I think are going to be those tools, the tools that we need to be able to go address the challenges well. They actually conveniently all start with the letter C, so I call them the 4 Cs, and they are critical thinking, creativity, compassion, and community. And in part two, I actually teach those skills concretely and talk about, how they might be applicable to the big challenges. And then in part three of the book, then I directly apply those skills to the challenges, not saying like, oh, I have the final answer. Because remember, earlier in the interview, I'm basically saying the first draft of everything is going to be like 90% wrong. But like, I just want to have a for example, so it doesn't sit there abstractly in people's minds that these skills might be useful for these challenges. I want to say, well, for example, this is what it would look like to start doing interesting experiments where you're using these skills to address those 3 big challenges. And I do it for all 3 big challenges. So by the end of the book, there's like a starting point on how to address all 3 big challenges of the 21st century.
So I have, so first of all, it's mind-blowing and super important and urgent, because we are going through all the challenges. And you touched, for instance, 10 years, but there was just recently a study from MIT that touches that around 10% or a big percentage of the jobs in the US are already being disrupted. And I think we're talking about 1.5 or close to $1.5 trillion. So this is already happening. So, but I think, so I have here a kind of notes and probably a question provocation to you, but as well as something that makes me feel every day, especially as a father and as a citizen. So in your book, and there's a lot of concepts that I'll try to synthesize here, and as well in your thinking, you argued, and I completely subscribe, that economical growth and planetary healing don't have to be opposites. And you speak as well of the
Yep.
concept of a regenerative economy. And so when you look at these two concepts, they are super important. But of course, there's a reality that humans are very complex systems. And of course, when it goes to our leaderships, unfortunately, we have a lot of troubling waves. And this is, of course, on the top of this, there's all the technology that we're not even talking, because, of course, we have technology. The technology will not stop. And for instance, I've been writing a lot about AI, and I'm building AI as well. And what I feel is that at the moment, we build already a new species, an alien species, whatever we call it, that will be evolving or within us or outside or both. So how do you see all of these things going together, especially with the concept that you have that I love, that is economical growth based on planetary healing? How can we get this? Bear in mind that the human species is very complex. And I know that this is a bigger question, but I would like to see this, and especially touching that you work with the most influential tech companies. So you've been actually, and as well, you are an investor. So in one end, you have the concept of building $1 trillion companies, in the case of Google, and in the case of you as well, investing. So I know that is a very big question, but I know that your books and your research is
Oh
as well. So
yeah,
how can we
I
touch
think there's
this?
a way to
Yeah.
I think there is a way to break it down. And one of the most important things is to understand that ecology and economy are not at odds with each other. So let's get really concrete. When you look at the damage that is being done by these industries, the physical damage to the planet is coming from industries that use physical resources. These are largely physical industries, right? It's not like, oh, somebody had an idea and they do these workshops, and because they do workshops in the wrong way, the planet's all broken. No, it's because we do actual damage to air, water, soil, and biodiversity through the way that we're doing industry, right? Now, what's great about every physical business, and this is true as an engineer and as an investor, is that every physical business has to follow the laws of physics by definition. If it is physical, it follows the laws of physics. And when one looks at the kind of, if one were to kind of open up the box on these physical industries, you're going to find that 90% of the cost structure of, 90% plus of almost every physical industry on the planet comes from just three cost drivers. First driver is feedstock cost, the cost of the atoms that you're going to transform. Second is processing cost, which is the cost of the energy and labor to go transform those atoms into something new. And third cost is transport logistic cost, which is the cost of getting those atoms to you, and then the cost of moving the end product or service, to your customer after you've done the thing. So it's pretty straightforward to understand why that would be 90% the cost of any physical business, right? Because that's the main thing you're doing. You're transforming physical atoms, you're delivering them to the people. Now, it turns out that ecological and economic wins are actually fully aligned on all three of those things, right? If I'm able to get a same quality of product, but I only need to use, 1/3 the matter, I'm saving on feedstock cost, which makes me more money, but I'm also extracting less from the world in the first place. So that's just better for ecology, right? If I'm able to get a better result using 1/10 the energy, then again, that is going to save me a lot of money. So I'm going to make a lot more money as a business owner or somebody in manufacturing. And I'm also going to have way less demands energy-wise on the planet because I'm using 1/10 the energy to get the same product out the door. And finally, if I'm able to save on time and space, then I can save on my transport logistic links. And like less emissions from transport miles, all that sort of thing, again, are well aligned with what I want as a business, and is also well aligned with a reduction in the net footprint to the planet. So first, I think we need to get 100% clear that ecological and economic wins are largely aligned. The reason that we, oftentimes start with the impression that they're not aligned is there's a tiny piece of the business. Because remember, we already covered 90% of the cost structure. So anything else is got to be the tiny minority. But there's a tiny piece of the business. And in most of these businesses, between like 1% to 5% of the cost structure around pollution. And pollution, sometimes get regulated by the government. And because pollution sometimes gets regulated by the government, that's the main thing that you'll hear companies lobbying for and complaining about. And because of that, you get the wrong impression. Well, the only thing that companies talk about environmentally is that they want to pollute more. Oh, well, that means, companies and the environment are automatically opposed to each other. No, no, no. On 90% of the cost structure, it's fully aligned, but that never makes the news because when somebody goes and ships a thing that uses 30% less energy, it is a big ecological win, but it doesn't make the news. It just made the company a little bit more money and life goes on, right? But the stuff that they actually go to the mat for with the lobbyists, they do ad campaigns, all this sort of stuff, is the antagonistic part about pollution. So I think like already you can have a lot clearer and realistic mindset on what it looks like to go clean up industry when you understand it's already 90% aligned, right? Focus on the feedstock cost reduction, focus on the energy reductions, focus on the transport logistic reductions, and see if you can build a higher quality product, with reductions in any or all of those three areas. On the pollution question, then we oftentimes are just choosing in our investment mix things where the pollution has been eliminated or dramatically reduced. So that even if you were, concerned about that and you wanted to go to the mat on the lobbying there, no, now we're practically reducing the cost of your pollution anyhow, because we're just making you have much less of it. That's honestly a way more effective way to get this stuff done than going to the mat over every regulation. Now, that said, do I think that government has a role to go regulate some of these things? Absolutely. But right now, the government isn't in its healthiest spot because there's been a lot of corporate capture where there's this kind of like lobbyist, policy making, industry revolving door where people come from industry and become lobbyists and get laws passed specifically helping a couple companies. And I think you just got to stop that. I mean, I'm not in a spot in the ecosystem where I can directly change it, but I can kind of point to the effect and be like, guys, just stop that. Like, the world ends up better if we have useful regulations in the right place. And then everything else actually is relatively aligned. And we should tell more of the stories where a reduction in feedstock or a reduction in energy for processing actually led to a combo ecological and economic win.
So I completely subscribe, but I have my last two questions. So how can we get these? Because like you said, there's two perceptions. There's one perception right now that, okay, we are in the verge of a civilizational crisis and AI is going to destroy a huge part of the conventional economy. And there's a huge energy draw that is coming from all this technology that we're using. That is one narrative. The other narrative, like you said, there's actually quite a lot of innovation and humans never lived so well in history, which is actually a fact as well, pure facts. But the perception is probably that people are looking more at the first not that brings all the negativity that we have on the media and all the, of course, there's as well, now we're going into kind of geopolitics that there's a lot of risks there. But well, one of the things that your book highlights is the 4 Cs. Critical thinking, creativity, compassion, and community, which is very important for me as well. And as well, you spoke about late stage capitalism and its limitations. So
yes,
how can we go specific to the 4 Cs to, first of all, create this narrative between the dystopian, or at least this more science fiction, Blade Runner, or whatever negativity, and bring this to education, to all these different things. Because I think for me, this is the biggest point, is if you don't get the communities to understand this, and you bring this to education, to business. And actually, well, for instance, you mentioned agriculture. I'm working a lot in agriculture. And for instance, 2.6 billion people are dependent of agriculture. Most of them don't even have the basics of education, digital ID, and
it's small landholder farmers that work on half an acre to about 5 acres. We've spent a lot of time in those environments and have invested in some innovations that can help them do that as well. The way that I would kind of parse out your question is a couple fold. The reason that I'm talking about those as the 4 Cs is actually twofold. One is that because I do really believe that they could be directly applied to the problems, which is a thing that I do in all of part 3 of the book, but also because I believe those 4 skills are the ones that are both going to continue to be better done by humans or just intrinsically more meaningful if done by humans, right? Because people like, well, like my generative AI can go like do creativity now. Like, look, I'm going to do a prompt and it's going to spit out 20 Rembrandts. Things in the style of Rembrandt. It's like, okay, sure, but how meaningful is that to you? Nothing, right? But if you sit down and you paint something for a month, then it is meaningful to you. And like the idea of like us like producing a lot of stuff with no meaning, that's insanity. right? That's a huge use of resources, and it basically has almost no human benefit. The fact that a thing could spin out 20 Rembrandts in 5 milliseconds just literally means nothing. Similarly, like people like, well, algorithms can also make community, right? Because like I got looped into so and so community. It suggested I join this group or whatever. And it's like, well, look, when an algorithm goes and grabs 10,000 similar interaction profiles in order to make an ad targeting block, you don't really feel the same way about that community as when an actual human community organizer who believes in something is out there trying to make an important change in the world. Like, I think we can tell the difference between those two states very clearly. And I think that, the reason I'm trying to teach those 4 skills in the book is those skills are both going to be incredibly useful for the 3 big challenges, and they are going to be part of every single job that is a human job, 50 years from now. So we might as well start treating those as foundational skills in the same way that we treat reading, writing, arithmetic as foundational skills. And as soon as we are able to go do that, then I think we are going to have a lot more jobs. Look, there's going to be a bunch of elder care jobs that are going to be really important. I think compassion is going to be a big deal for that. I think being able to create community around elders that need more than one type of support is going to be a big deal around that. One can pretend that some home robot helper is going to be able to do everything about everything, and I hope it does something, right? But on the flip side of it, then you think about the places where, folks that are elderly have the best lives. It's when they're surrounded by community. It's when they have, lots of different types of support and not just the mechanical support of being able to lift them out of a chair or something, right? So I think like we are going to start to realize what is most important about the human journey. And I'm a chess player too, so I actually saw this entire arc play out. Because I remember when, Kasparov lost to Deep Blue, and there were some predictions where it's like, oh, nobody's going to play chess anymore because it's a solved game and the computers are better than us. And it is true. Like now the computers are even better. Like back then, IBM had to basically make a supercomputer to beat Kasparov. Now, the processing power on your phone is more than enough to go beat the best grandmasters in the world, right? But we see that we didn't stop playing. We actually started to play for more human reasons. We started to play because we wanted to show our own excellence, because we wanted to develop our own minds, because we wanted to have interesting creative outlets, and that to me is the mark of a future that we are purposely choosing as opposed to one that is dominated by kind of corporate agenda. The reason that people are so feeling that dystopian energy right now is we don't have a great answer to being able to push back on corporate agenda, and corporate agenda is intrinsically myopic, right? As much as, there are smart people that work in companies, and I think that, and look, I was one of them, and I feel like we came to work and tried to do our best work every day. I'm going to tell you the larger goals of a corporation are not as complete as the goals that a human would have. Like a corporation, if you can make that number go up and you can keep on improving your margins, the top line goes up, margin improves, you're doing great, right? Cost of capital goes down, credit rating goes up, great, you're doing great. So there are things that a corporation can do and be excellent at. But if one were to say that was the only thing that existed in life, people would say, well, this is not a real life then. This is not a human life. And we're trying to make, things through corporations that are supposed to satisfy most of human life. But right now we've kind of gotten to the spot where they're kind of antagonistic against each other. So in the book, I also lay out some approaches where we can get to more of a balance of power in terms of the way that corporations operate. And this is not me being like, oh, corporations are completely evil. They can never produce anything good. I worked in a bunch of corporations and invented stuff that I know has helped people. But on the flip side of it, I also know that corporate incentives alone, taken to their extreme, do not solve all of society's problems. And you're going to need to have that balance of influences in society in order for the corporate efficiency machine to do the useful things, that it is meant to be efficient at. But efficient doesn't mean available. I mean, I actually make this point in the in the book as well, right? The U.S. Post Office, if it was trying to be efficient, it would never, send any mail to Alaska. It just doesn't make sense, right? But the way that that sort of system works and how most government systems should work is to make things available. And right now, people really get onto these really intense, ideological battles because they say, "Oh, I'm a capitalist and you're a socialist." And the thing is, like, again, major category error. Why are you making a system of operation into an identity? That makes no sense to me. Don't do that, right? To me, like, capitalism is a synonym for makes efficient, and socialism is a synonym for makes available. Now, we want the US Post Office to be available everywhere. We don't want to cut off Alaska just by saying, like, it's too expensive to send anything there, so it's inefficient to send anything there. You guys aren't a state anymore because we can't send you any mail. That'd be insane. So, like, we run a post office that actually moves more mail than any of the big players, but it basically does it at a break-even level. That's a terrible corporation as things go, right? It's not retaining a bunch of earnings that allow it to grow and return, profits to shareholders and all sort of thing. But in terms of something that is, socialistically making something widely available and useful, it's incredible, right? Because it's not costing any significant amount of money. It basically is a break-even operation where we don't need to put in a bunch of tax dollars to go do it, but it provides a makes available service literally everywhere. And I pose in the book the way that we can actually cooperate on these things. Because, like, corporations are good at trying to make little pocket problems efficient. So what you could do is you could have a government that, if it's been running, things a particular way, and it says, "Hey, this department is a bit inefficient. We think that there's a better way to go handle the electronic records. We think there's a better way to do the, on the ground operating." Then you could actually spool out, some RFPs to corporations and say, like, "Guys, we want you all to compete on building a better design for this system. If you end up being the selected design, we'll actually pay you a license or royalty fee for every year that we're continuing to use it. But if some other corporation gives us an even better way of doing it, we're going to pay the licensing to them. You guys don't need to operate it. We'll staff it because we don't want corporate, capture of all government services. That would be very unstable in the long run because corporations are just not as stable, right? Corporations come and go in 20 years. Like Yahoo's one of the biggest companies in the world. 20 years ago, it is not now. And so, like, I don't think it makes sense to, like, have them fully privatized because corporations are not stable enough. But corporations are innovative around efficiency. And given that, just pay them a licensing fee if they were the ones that came up with the stuff you've been using over this 3-year span. And if a different corporation comes up with an even better one, you adopt that and you stop paying that licensing fee. But what that encourages is the people that are good at efficiency actually keep on improving the systems that will eventually be used in government. But they're not guaranteed those contracts for all of time, and they don't get looped in with the instability of the corporate, like rise and fall, that kind of flux. So look, I think if you drop the labels, if you say, like, oh, instead of saying, like, I'm a capitalist all the way to my bones, I'm a socialist all the way to my bones, you think to yourself, like, how do we make the things that we want to make widely available, how do we do that efficiently? And when we do capitalism, how do we make the efficient things, like, not damaging to society? Then that's more of the right zone. And I think being able to pull the right, skills and abilities and tasks and talent from all those different mindsets is where you get to the better outcome. I think the actual goal of a lot of people in power is for us to be fighting and having these sorts of arguments, because the arguments and the powerlessness is the major tool of keeping things exactly like they are. And people feel hopeless because hopelessness is the purposeful tool of people in power that don't want anything to change. So if your politicians are saying things that make you feel hopeless, understand that purposely or accidentally, they are feeding in to the system that will make things not change. If you can go break this, and this is why critical thinking is the first skill that I teach, let's break some of these frames. If you're out there saying, like, I can only ever be a socialist, I can only ever be a capitalist, you're probably preventing yourself from being a part of a lot of the solutions that could be the most impactful ones.
I'm with you, and it's very inspiring the way you put it, and I appreciate. So I know that we passed the time, so
we got to finish up. Sorry about that.
No. For me, it's a pleasure. I still have a lot more questions, but last one, we didn't touch about too much about AI, and I know
Yeah.
so two angles here that I would like to touch. So one angle is you work with governments, and you touch a bit in some of the last questions. That I work as well with governments, and what I've been understanding is I prefer the communities because the governments keep going and coming and going, and sometimes you have some
Yeah.
surprises. So looking at 10 to 20 years, so we touch about the challenge with AI, but of course there's the climate technologies, there's as well the reshaping of the global economy, because for instance, from Elon Musk to all the most of the AI experts, me included, we're talking that we're going to have AGI between this year and the next 2 or 3 years. And of course, probably I don't think we'll have just one AGI, we'll have multiple, but this will actually create a lot of disruption, a lot of different things. Of course, a lot of these AGIs, when they become mostly sentient, which at the moment we have mostly language of digital sentience, but there will be a lot of multiple iterations. I think it's more like Star Wars, where we have your robots and different things. But well, that's about science fiction.
Sure.
But I would like to come more to your opinion. So from this focus on the four C's and your book, how can we bring this to create these next 10 years in a way that you don't lose the track of this technology that we invented and lose the track of geopolitics? Because in the end of the day, we have the two balls in the air right now. And of course, we can have a third one that is, of course, all the areas of environment, which we still have a lot of work to do, which is your major focus.
Look, I think there's like a gentle way that this can happen, and I think there's a more chaotic way that this can happen. The gentle way that this can happen is we realize that if you only prioritize, the technology and the capital and you don't prioritize the people, you're going to end up with a very unstable outcome where you've like just really hurt a lot of people through the quote unquote advancement. And given that, you can say like, oh, look at how smart I am. I like got rid of constraints and I was able to move faster because I got rid of constraints. But no, that's not smart. You actually have created a fully unstable system. And when you create that unstable system, there will be collapse and you'll need to go recover from collapse, which tends to be a lot more expensive. And this is why I'm saying it's like we can either have a gentle realization and we can already start to prioritize, hey, there's other ways to go do this. Actually, this is covered in the book, but I'll just share it briefly. Like in 2013, this group from Singapore came out because they knew I had worked on the self-driving car. And they had done this analysis that basically said, Singapore's an island, so it's a fixed area. So we can't grow our population. We can't have a lot of, we can't like triple our immigration in order to go grow our economy because we just run out of space, right? And generally speaking, immigration grows an economy at whatever, way longer conversation. But at least Singapore understands that. And they said, like, look, maximum we might be able to grow our population 20% more, but that's it. Like, we just don't have enough space. So the only way that we can succeed in having Singapore be more prosperous is for every Singaporean to be more prosperous. So we've done an analysis of all the jobs in Singapore and which ones are the largest populations that are consistently low paid. And the biggest one in the mix is taxi drivers. So they were already talking to me in 2013. That's 13 years ago. And they had actually already 13 years ago created retraining programs to help people that wanted to graduate out of taxi driving into other higher paying professions. They had already implemented those programs for free or at incredibly low cost to anybody that wanted to go do that. And their plan was, as we actually reduce the supply of taxi drivers through our programs, we'd like to backfill them with self-driving taxis. Now, at the end of the day, it's just a slight inversion in time, right? In America, we just say the technology is coming, get ready to lose your job. In Singapore, they said, well, look, we need every Singaporean to be more prosperous. So let's start by taking care of the folks that might be displaced by this. And then as we succeed in up-leveling their lives, we can then backfill it with the technology. So Singapore is not sitting around trying to drag its feet and not be part of, the technological innovation. If you've ever visited there, it like looks like you're already in the year 2040. They very much embrace, future and innovation. But I think they are bringing to it a more human lens that I think makes a huge difference. That difference in compassion, think about what that does in terms of the stability of that society over those decades. And we could say, well, in innovation, it could go 5% faster if we got rid of that intention. Sure. but yeah, 5% faster on a way more volatile base. So like you don't necessarily have great guarantees that even if you've innovated incredibly quickly, that you have a stable society on the other side, which is why like Peter Thiel like has a huge like underground compound in New Zealand, and a bunch of other people are like making bunkers to go hide out from the AI doomsday. And it's like you don't need to even make that. You can actually do what Singapore did and just prioritize like the advancement of society in the mix and just have it be early enough. I think the other thing that is a bit worrying is that this technology is not democratized in a meaningful way yet. And what it means is that the people that are going to first succeed at this are going to be the people that have the massive resources to train models, to go pay for inference, data centers, all that sort of thing. And that limits the benefit to a relatively small group in terms of who's going to be first there. And the irony of this is that a lot of these people, like whether it's, the Google founders or Elon Musk or whatever, they originally made their way because of open protocols, right? They made their way on the web with PayPal, with Google, with all that sort of thing. And it's because HTML, CSS, all these things were basically open standards that people could learn in 3 hours on an afternoon. And because of it, people that didn't come from a bunch of means, right? It's not like the Google founders were billionaires before that, right? Even Bill Gates, who's like, dad was relatively rich, like they didn't have billion-dollar kind of money. But like, they basically worked on things that were open enough that a lot of people could actually make contributions. And now that we just have a couple big AI companies jockeying for this, I'm very concerned about that as a morphology for the development of the technology. I think it will, capital wants to protect capital, and capital wants to protect capital basically irregardless of what humans want. And I'm just going to say, like, that's already, if you're worried about like inhuman consciousnesses, attacking society, well, capital is already doing that. You can actually see like exactly how bad stuff can get when you give the reins over to a inhuman thought process. And very concerned about that. That's why we need to flip it around. And it's ironic to me that these people that came up on open standards like pulled up the ladder behind them. That's ridiculous.
I subscribe completely, and I think we need to act more on that. Tom, last thing. So, for young people listening to us, you just mentioned a couple of concerns that I share as well, and I've been highlighting here. But one of the things that I want to touch, and I know that you are a humanist and as well a person that cares for community, for the planet, and for people in particular. So, what advice, as someone that is extremely successful, you give to young people? Because, like you said, a lot of people, even I have people in my team from all different parts of the world, and they are actually feeling precisely this despair because effectively, for instance, most of the jobs for young people are right now not being attributed because people prefer to use AI agents, and we're not even as advanced as we discussed before. So what is the advice, and as well practicalities, because I think we need to think about them because they are our future.
Yeah, look, there will be billions of people around, and there will be billions of human problems around regardless. And AI is going to, and robotics are going to prioritize the things that can make the most money soonest. That's not necessarily all the problems for sure. And a lot of times they're not the problems that matter to you. So what I would suggest, and remember, I think the backdrop ahead of all the stuff I'm about to say is that powerlessness is a tool of people that are in control, right? If everybody else feels powerless other than the people that are in control, then everything stays according to plan based on the people that are in control. Now, if the people that are in control are not being humanistic at a level that it actually brings everybody along, that is the time for people to start building the alternative thing, right? And I would say, like, very similar to what I said about like my report card and way back when, is like, no, get insanely passionate about the places where you do have some power, where you can build something, where you are inspired to go and I mean build in the widest sense of the word, right? Like if you can build a community around you that cares about something, that is building, right? If you are an accountant that is good at keeping things in order financially, there's a bunch of teams that are making differences in the world where they need better accounting. And that to me would still be like a build style contribution. But if there's anything that I could tell the young folks is that the prioritization that we've given to the talkers is insane, right? Like, like obviously, famously, Joe Rogan got like hundreds of millions of dollars for his podcast. But I'll tell you that the engineers that like worked on a self-driving car in the early days, they're all getting paid $200,000 a year. They weren't getting paid $200 million. And like we're in this weird moment where we've basically prioritized the talkers over the makers and the doers. And it's like, I think there's a really simple thing to remember, which is the future will be built by the builders. So you should stick around the people that are the builders. And whatever type of building you know how to make, whether it be building a community, building financial statements because you're good at accounting, building things more like what I've done in my career, like actual technology, design work, engineering work that goes to ship. Learn the type of building that matters to you, that you're attracted to, and stick around other people that are building. Don't spend too much time around the talkers. Like if there's any time you spend around talkers, it's to redirect you to the builders that are mattering. And the talkers that are mostly just excited about the sound of their own voice, you can just duck out. Nothing interesting is going to happen there. They're going to be talking about the same stuff 5 years from now, and it'll be obvious. And a lot of them have a long enough track record. You can see that they really got nothing done in that time period, right? They didn't make important connections. They didn't help to advance, a thread. They didn't like use their, put their own shoulder to the work on anything. So the future will be built by the builders. Whatever type of builder you are, figure it out, get skilled in the thing, get connected with other people that are making. And I'm going to tell you that there is real sanity and integrity in the build process. Because basically, look, we're in a world right now which is about like viral takes and like, oh, my hot take is this and all that sort of thing. And you have these talkers that will say something, and then 2 months later, they'll say something that completely contradicts what they said 2 months ago, and nobody holds them accountable, right? It's as if it didn't happen as long as each thing got a lot of views, right? But like if you're a builder, you have to build things with integrity. If I'm a person that designs and builds bridges, if my bridge falls down, I'm out of that job. I'm not going to get to be a bridge builder in the future. So the thing is that builders, regardless of political persuasion, and I spend a lot of time in red states because I invest in the future of agriculture, the future of manufacturing. I spend a lot of time with people that vote very differently than me. But I'm going to say, because we're both builders, we have intrinsic integrity and respect for each other. We know that we wouldn't be able to stay in this job unless the things that we built actually worked and could get out in the world. And when you're in that world, like a lot of the political noise falls away because just the respect and integrity of being around other builders dominates. And the better you are at building, like every builder wants to teach other builders, right? It's like, hey, I've been in this for 20 years. It looks like you're just getting started. Let me teach you how to debug the circuit. Let me teach you how to like get a clean cut, using this machine. Let me teach you how to form this together in a way that's going to have better statics in terms of like the mechanical design of the thing, right? And like that is such a more deeply supportive environment. It's very apolitical, and you actually get some shit done. And when you can actually build the thing, then it completely overturns that kind of mantle of powerlessness that people are, that the folks in power would love for us to all adapt. And every single time that you do that, it basically is the start of the revolutionary act of the society you're trying to make, as opposed to the one that people are just kind of feeding to you that would satisfy the people that currently have the most power.
I subscribe, and it's very inspiring, and it's very special. I think it's been mind-blowing. First of all, I want to thank you, Tom, for your time and for as well for the fantastic innovation you brought to the world, and as well for your passion for building, and as well for creating and putting communities together. So for people listening to us, we'll put all the information about this. I personally am a huge fan of your work and everything you stand for, and the work that you've been as well pushing, both as thought leader, as a maker, and as a creator. And it's been very privileged to have you here.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. And the reason that I taught rapid prototyping the way that I did is I really wanted to show people that it can be quite cheap to be able to go invent the world that you want. So like that's also why I use such inexpensive materials. But they are also the materials that work best for prototyping. But yes, it's about the democratization. That's what I've been trying to get done.
And definitely we'll push this forward, and as well, like you said, I think push the builders to talk to the builders, because there's a lot of talkers, and there's a big problem that creates a lot of toxicity that we have to focus coming back to community.
Absolutely.
Well,
thank you.
fantastic. So thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for watching this episode. Please share your thoughts, questions, or a topic you want next in the comments section. My team and I read them all and will tailor our future videos around your feedback. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next drop. Until next time, stay healthy and informed.